They were the shining stars of Hollywood's golden age, children adored on screens and magazine covers, only to suddenly vanish. What really happened to these 20 beloved child actors when the cameras stopped rolling? Their smiles lit up our television screens and movie theaters. Their names topped headlines across America. Yet one day, they disappeared without warning. Some were lost to tragedy, others to the harsh realities of growing up in a ruthless industry. And a few chose to walk away on their own terms. This video dives into their fascinating stories, tales of fame, fortune, heartbreak, and resilience. From the 1930s through the 1970s, these child stars captured hearts worldwide, only to fade into obscurity or reimagine themselves far from the spotlight. Prepare to discover secrets behind their sudden absences, the challenges they faced, and where life took them after the curtains closed. Some stories will break your heart, others will restore your faith in humanity. Stay with us as we reveal the complex reality behind seemingly magical childhood fame, shining a light on what happened to the faces we once adored. Bobby Driscoll's fall from fame. Bobby Driscoll was Disney's first contracted child star, the voice of Peter Pan and the face of Treasure Island. At just 12 years old, he won an Academy Juvenile Award for his performances in The Window, and So Dear to My Heart, signaling a future that seemed limitless in Hollywood. But puberty hit Bobby hard. His cherubic face, once his greatest asset, began changing rapidly. Acne scarred his skin and his features matured in ways that made him no longer fit the image Disney wanted. Walt Disney, who had once treated him like a son, abruptly terminated his contract in 1953, just 3 years after starring in Disney's live-action hit Treasure Island. Though executives claimed Bobby had become difficult to work with, the crueler reality was more about image than behavior. Dropped by Disney and labeled washed up at 16, Bobby tumbled into a devastating spiral of drug addiction and petty crime. His parents, unsure how to help, sent him to a rehabilitation center, but it did little to save him. By his early 20s, he was deep into heroin addiction, arrested multiple times, and completely estranged from the industry that had once celebrated him. The tragic final chapter came in 1968, when children playing in an abandoned tenement in New York City discovered the body of a man, unidentifiable and unclaimed. He was buried on Hart Island in an unmarked pauper's grave. Almost 2 years later, his mother requested the police reopen the investigation. Fingerprint records confirmed the heartbreaking truth. The unclaimed body was Bobby Driscoll, dead at 31 from heart failure caused by long-term drug use. The boy who once flew as Peter Pan ended his days alone, forgotten, and unrecognized. His fall from grace remains one of the cruelest twists in a life that began with such vibrant promise. Margaret O'Brien's graceful exit. Unlike many child stars, Margaret O'Brien chose to leave Hollywood on her own terms. As a child, she captivated audiences with her emotional depth in films like Meet Me in St. Louis opposite Judy Garland. Her performance as Tootie Smith earned her a Special Academy Juvenile Award, making her one of MGM's most valuable child assets. By the early 1950s, however, Margaret's career had slowed considerably. The transition from adorable child to teenager proved challenging and roles became scarce. Rather than chasing diminishing opportunities, Margaret made a conscious choice to step away from Hollywood's spotlight. What happened next defies the typical child star narrative. Margaret redirected her energies toward education and a private life. She married and focused on family, making occasional appearances in television and theater, but never attempting to recapture her former glory. Today, at 87 years old, Margaret O'Brien lives a quiet life in California. Unlike many of her contemporaries, she managed her finances well and remains one of the few living links to Hollywood's golden age. She occasionally appears at film festivals, and classic movie events where fans are delighted to discover she's maintained the same gentle spirit and warm smile that endeared her to audiences over 8 decades ago. Margaret's choice to leave Hollywood on her own terms rather than being forced out by changing tastes or fading popularity represents a road less traveled among child stars, one of graceful exit rather than painful expulsion. Claude Jarman Jr.'s choice for normalcy. Oscar-winning young star Claude Jarman Jr. vanished from screens by the 1950s, but it was his decision, not rejection. Preferring stability, he left acting to finish education, served in the Navy, and later became executive director of the San Francisco International Film Festival. His story stands as a rare example of choosing a fulfilling life beyond fame. Unlike many child stars who fought to cling to Hollywood's spotlight, Claude recognized early that a normal life held more promise. After memorable roles like Jodie Baxter in The Yearling, he quietly stepped back to complete high school in Tennessee, blending in with his peers rather than chasing fleeting stardom. Education came first. He attended Vanderbilt University, then served his country in the Navy. Upon returning, instead of returning to acting, he shifted to a new path in film administration. As executive director of a major film festival for 15 years, Claude shaped cinema culture behind the scenes, proving that impact need not be on the screen. His choice reflects a rare maturity among child stars, opting out before Hollywood's harsh realities could take their toll. Today, at 89, he lives a fulfilling life with family, at peace with Hollywood's past and his diverse contributions to film history. Claude's journey embodies the possibility of happiness beyond the limelight, inspiring others to seek their own normalcy rather than fame's elusive glow. Deanna Durbin's self-imposed disappearance. Deanna Durbin was a box office queen who made $400,000 per film, yet shocked Hollywood by retiring at just 27. At the absolute peak of her career, she walked away from a $200,000 per year contract, voluntarily abandoning a career that others would have killed for. Unlike other stars pushed out by changing tastes or aging, Deanna chose to leave on her own terms. She moved to a small village outside Paris, France, married her third husband, producer Charles David, and for the next 64 years of her life, refused nearly all interview requests and declined every offer to return to performing. Her popularity was so immense that a fan club devoted to her boasted more members than any other star at the time. Deanna's soprano voice and wholesome image made her one of Universal Studios' most profitable stars, reportedly saving the studio from bankruptcy. When asked years later about her decision, she made a rare statement. "I was never happy in Hollywood. I couldn't deal with the unreality of the life I was expected to live." She explained that the manufactured image of the perpetual girl next door had become suffocating, and no amount of money could compensate for the loss of her privacy and authentic self. Her deliberate choice to walk away from fame and fortune remains perhaps the most dramatic self-imposed disappearance in Hollywood history. Deanna lived quietly in France until her death in 2013 at age 91, steadfastly refusing all attempts to coax her back into the spotlight. Brendan DeWilde's promising life cut short. Brendan DeWilde, with his blonde hair and expressive blue eyes, captured hearts in Shane, 1953, delivering the iconic line, "Shane, come back! Come back!" that still resonates in film history. His performance earned him an Academy Award nomination at just 11 years old, making him one of the youngest nominees ever. Unlike many child actors who struggle to find adult roles, Brendan successfully transitioned to teenage parts in films like HUD alongside Paul Newman and television series, including The Virginian. His talent seemed to promise a long, successful career as an adult actor, but fate had other plans for Brendan. In July 1972, while driving near Denver, Colorado, he lost control of his vehicle and crashed into a construction truck. At just 30 years old, Brandon DeWild's promising life was cut tragically short. The boy who had once called for Shane to come back would never return to the screen himself. His death at such a young age left fans wondering what might have been. Critics believe Brandon had the talent and range to become one of his generation's finest character actors. Instead, his filmography remains frozen at a mere 17 films, a small but significant legacy. Brandon's story reminds us of the fragility of life and how suddenly promising careers can be extinguished. While not a disappearance by choice, his premature death removed him from Hollywood's constellation of stars, just as he was entering what should have been his prime years as an actor. Shirley Temple's unmatched second act. No list of child stars is complete without Shirley Temple, the most famous child actor in Hollywood history. With her bouncing curls and dimpled smile, she single-handedly lifted American spirits during the Great Depression. By age 7, she was earning $50,000 per film, equivalent to nearly $1 million today. And her merchandise, from dolls to clothing lines, generated millions more. And even Shirley Temple, the brightest star in the child actor firmament, faced Hollywood's brutal reality. Children grow up. As she entered adolescence, her box office appeal waned dramatically. 20th Century Fox, the studio that had profited immensely from her childhood popularity, dropped her contract when she turned 12. After a few unsuccessful attempts at teenage roles, including a screen test for The Wizard of Oz that didn't pan out, Shirley retired from films at the remarkably young age of 22. But unlike many former child stars who vanished into obscurity or struggled with the loss of fame, Shirley Temple Black, as she became known after marriage, engineered one of the most successful second acts in American public life. After raising her children, she entered politics, running unsuccessfully for Congress before being appointed as a UN delegate in 1969. Her diplomatic career flourished as she became U.S. ambassador to Ghana and later to Czechoslovakia, proving her talents extended far beyond dimpled smiles and tap dancing. Shirley maintained a dignified public persona throughout her life, barely expressing bitterness about her dramatic fall from Hollywood's heights. When asked about her extraordinary journey from child star to diplomat, she once remarked, "I have one piece of advice for those who want to become actors. Don't." Her later career in public service until her death in 2014 demonstrated that leaving Hollywood's spotlight didn't mean disappearing from meaningful contribution to society. A valuable lesson for child stars who followed in her tiny tap shoes. Tommy Reig's reinvention beyond Lassie. Tommy Reig made TV history as Jeff Miller, the first boy owner of the famous collie on the Lassie television series, becoming a household name in the 1950s. With his all-American looks and natural rapport with a K9 star, Tommy captured the hearts of millions. However, by age 14, he had grown increasingly uncomfortable with the constraints and pressures of fame, and in a surprising move, he asked to be released from his Lassie contract. Walking away from what many considered a dream role shocked producers and fans alike. The reality after Lassie wasn't easy for Tommy. Casting directors struggled to see him as anything other than the boy with the famous dog, making roles scarce. His teenage years were marked by a steep decline in acting opportunities. Tommy's adult life took a tumultuous turn. In the 1960s, he faced legal troubles, including an arrest related to marijuana cultivation, which further hindered any possibility of revitalizing his acting career. Struggling to find his path, he worked a variety of jobs, ranging from farmhand to computer programmer. Ironically, it was in programming that Tommy found a new sense of purpose and success. Becoming an early expert in database programming, he eventually became a respected software consultant and even authored programming books. This career was a world apart from Hollywood's stage lights, but offered him stability and fulfillment. Tommy Reag's story is one of dramatic reinvention. From child star to troubled teen, then to a pioneer in a completely different field, his journey reflects resilience and adaptability. His life reminds us that sometimes stepping away from fame can open doors to unexpected opportunities and satisfying new chapters. Baby Peggy's lost childhood and late voice. Long before Shirley Temple's curls bounced across screens, there was Baby Peggy, one of silent cinema's first child stars. Between 1921 and 1924, this diminutive performer made over 150 short films and several features, becoming a global sensation before she turned 6 years old. With her trademark page boy haircut and solemn expression, she delighted audiences with her ability to parody adult stars like Rudolph Valentino and Polri. At the height of her fame, Baby Peggy earned an astounding $1.5 million a year, equivalent to roughly $23 million today, supported her entire extended family, and received over 1.7 million fan letters. Figures that would be impressive for any star, let alone a kindergartner. But Baby Peggy's stardom came at a terrible price. Her father, a former cowboy with Hollywood connections, managed her career with an iron fist, forcing her to work up to 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. She received no education, had no friends her own age, and never saw a penny of her enormous earnings. When she would cry on set from exhaustion, crew members would hold an ice cube to her face until she stopped. By 1925, her career had collapsed due to her father's arguments with producers and mismanagement of her finances. The family's fortune vanished almost overnight through bad investments and lavish spending. By age 7, Baby Peggy was washed up, a has-been before most children start first grade. The family's financial desperation forced her back to work in vaudeville, where she toured exhaustively until the Great Depression ended that revenue stream as well. By her teenage years, her identity as Baby Peggy had become such a burden that she legally changed her name to Deanna Sarah Carey, attempting to distance herself from her exploited childhood. Deanna spent decades in relative obscurity, working ordinary jobs and struggling to understand what had happened to her extraordinary childhood. It wasn't until her 70s that film historians rediscovered her significance to cinema history, and she began speaking publicly about child exploitation in early Hollywood. She lived to the remarkable age of 101, passing away in 2020 as the last surviving major star of the silent era. In her later years, Deanna became an author and advocate for child actors' rights, turning her painful experiences into a force for positive change. The girl who had once been world famous as Baby Peggy ultimately found her most meaningful role as Deanna Sarah Carey, historian, author, and voice for those exploited by the entertainment industry. Scotty Beckett's downward spiral. With his signature sideways newsboy cap and mischievous grin, Scotty Beckett charmed audiences as one of the original Little Rascals in the Our Gang comedies. Later, he successfully transitioned to feature films, playing the younger versions of stars like Frederick March and Spencer Tracy, even appearing as the young Al Jolson in The Jolson Story. Scotty's early career seemed blessed. He worked constantly throughout the 1930s and 1940s, avoiding the sudden unemployment that befell many child actors. As a teenager, he even landed a recurring role in the popular Rocky Jones Space Ranger television series, suggesting he might be one of the rare child performers to successfully transition to adult roles. But behind Scotty's cheerful on-screen persona lurked mounting personal demons. His father's death, when Scotty was 14, sent him into an emotional tailspin from which he never fully recovered. In his late teens, he began a pattern of self-destructive behavior, drinking heavily, abusing prescription medications, and engaging in increasingly erratic public incidents. His downward spiral accelerated in the 1950s. Multiple marriages ended in divorce, arrests for drunk driving, and check fraud accumulated, and his once promising career disintegrated. By the late 1950s, Scotty was unemployable in Hollywood, his reputation thoroughly destroyed by his unpredictable